I'll just do a brief introduction. So I'd just like to offer a very warm welcome to everyone joining us today for this online event, which is on counselling research in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm not sure if I've pronounced that correctly. My name is Dr. Nathan Beel. It's my pleasure to be your host today. So before we begin, I just want to take a moment to ground ourselves in the places we are joining from. I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of the lands across Australia, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations people with us today. Now, I'm just wondering whether I could have someone from New Zealand to offer a traditional welcome from the New Zealand continent.
Can I call on you, Caroline?
Ai, ngā mihi. Ko karakia tātou, tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho, kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, humi e, hui e, taiki e. That's welcoming us into this space and using Reo Māori, so tangata whenua of Aotearoa.
Okay, thank you, Caroline, much appreciated. So I'll just give a little bit of a context to the event for people watching and introduce the speaker or the panel, and then we'll start. So today's event is organised by the National Heads of Counselling and Psychotherapy Education Research Subcommittee as part of our goal and our vision to try and help support and build counselling research capacity here in Australia. And for the past couple of years, we've been working it was chaired by Dr. Katrina Andrews. We meet monthly and we try to look at strategies, develop them and implement them to try and develop and strengthen research training, strengthen research awareness, and hopefully develop a culture or strengthen a culture of research in the Australian counselling profession. As part of this, we have been speaking with counselling researchers from different regions around the world to learn the practices, challenges and successes, and also the histories of counselling research in their locations. And today we've spoken to key leaders in the UK and the US, and this morning we have invited our colleagues from across the Tasman, our neighbours. So it's my privilege to introduce our esteemed panel today from the University of Waikato. We welcome Dr. Paul Flanagan, Professional Leader of Counsellor Education Programs, and lecturer Dr. Carolyn Day. They're joined by Dr. Raewyn Elder, Program Coordinator for Counselling and Guidance at Massey University, and also honoured to welcome Dr. Judi Miller, formerly of the University of Canterbury, who has made foundational contributions to counselling research in New Zealand. So, and are there any more from New Zealand who would like to just identify as well?
Steph, do you want to introduce yourself? No, okay, that's fine. So I'm incredibly grateful that the panel is willing to share their time and willing to share their perspectives with us today. And hopefully some of the insights will stimulate some additional ideas for counselling research in Australia. And maybe there can be some discussion as well, and hopefully there might be some mutual benefit as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Paul to open from the New Zealand discussion, and throughout, feel free if people want to offer questions and some discussion points as well as we go. So thanks, Paul. Kia ora, Nathan. I'm just wondering if the panel would like to speak a little bit to themselves, like Judi, you know, as the senior colleague with more history than the rest of us. What might you want to say about yourself as we start today?
Kia ora, thank you. Paul, I just think I wrote a little note to Paul earlier and said I think I'm a bit of a fraud being here, talking for the University of Canterbury. And the reason I'm doing that, or I said I would do it, is that Associate Professor Shani Barraclough is the lead for that university program. And she's currently on study leave somewhere else in the world. So I sort of thought we need to have somebody representing it. I can talk a little bit about the history of the counselling program there, but I think Paul's sort of set up a PowerPoint, so I'd rather sort of hold that back until after then.
Thank you. Raewyn, do you want to say anything or wait until we're talking?
Well, just ko Raewyn Elder tuku ingoa no waira aho. So I'm Raewyn Elder from Massey University, and I come from Wairau, the top of the south, and we're a blended program, so we can work all over the country. And I'm working today from Whakatū, Nelson. So lovely to see everybody here today.
The top of the South Island.
Top of the South Island, yes.
Right.
I should say, not the top of the south of Australia or Queensland.
Caroline, do you want to say a little more about yourself?
Nā mihi ki ora anō. No ārangi ahau ko rangitane ki Manawatu tuku iwi, kei Kirikiriroa e noho ana ko Caroline Day tuku ingoa. So I'm living in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, where the University of Waikato is, but I hail from a small town called Fielding in the Manawatu and whakapapa to Rangatani, which is an iwi down there. Lovely to be here.
Kia ora. Ko Parongi e te maunga, ko Waikato te awa, e whānau au I Kirikiriroa, ko Paul Flanagan taku ingoa. So I introduce myself as being on the land of Waikato Tainui, and acknowledge the iwi, the tribes of this area. My family hailed from Scotland, Ireland, England and Denmark from the 1840s through to the 1860s, and living in Hamilton since the mid-50s. So thank you for your welcome, for the opportunity to share something of our stories of counsellor education and counselling research here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'll share the slides that I have prepared, if I can have them ready. Right. Can you see that?
Yes.
Aye.
Right. It's the wrong screen, but anyway, we'll work with this one. So that's just a site of part of our campus here at Waikato. We have introduced ourselves to you and where we're from, and I thought briefly we could explore something of the history of counsellor education and therefore research in the programs here in New Zealand. And Judi, please pop in because you're more familiar with this, but also have written about it too. But the history of counsellor education in universities stems from the early 1970s, following a change in the Education Act in the late 60s, where counselling was to be provided in secondary schools. So the two key funders of counsellor education were the then Department of Education, but also the Department of Labour for careers guidance counsellors.
Paul, I think you've got another slide that you're speaking to. Is that right?
What can you see?
I can just see the front, the photograph.
Oh, yes. Does that work better?
That works better.
All right. Thank you. So, Judi, you were researching counsellor education or counselling back then, weren't you? Around about the 80s?
Yes. Well, I started at Canterbury in 1988, actually.
Yeah.
So at that time, you really didn't need to do much research to be an academic, but that changed, the landscape of that changed quite considerably. But the Canterbury program did start in 1974, along with Massey and Auckland. And it was, as a result, as you say, the school guidance counsellors, the schools needed guidance counsellors, and this is how the government of the day suggested they might get it. The school counsellors, the PPTA, was very clever and said if we want to have them, they need to be, it needs to be a postgraduate qualification. So that straight away, you had some quite strong programs, but it did take quite a long time for it to get up to something like a Master of Counselling. In fact, in Canterbury, we were a Master of Education up until 2013, and then we were able to shift into a Master of Counselling. So, you know, it was slow moving. Oh, yeah, and at that time, as you say, the academics who were running these programs were probably the major people who were doing research, counselling research.
And your research was around the development of the professionalisation of counselling in New Zealand, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
The University of Waikato I'll speak to soon, but again, it was a Master of Education in Counselling up until the mid-90s. So around about 96, I think the degree changed name. And then there were, in the 80s, with a whole lot of deregulation in education, the programs at polytechs and private training establishments who had been offering certificates and diplomas at various areas of therapy and counselling were then able to offer bachelor degree programs. So Raewyn and Caroline, you've been part of that sector over the years. Do you want to speak briefly to that?
Yes, the undergraduate Bachelor of Counselling programs became degree programs in 2012. Actually, before that, they were diploma programs. So, and in fact, the undergraduate programs are mostly have a more practical approach to counsellor education and don't have a lot of research in them, but they do usually have a research methods course that is an introduction to research. And I guess one of the things that I have noted increasingly, and as I think we all observed on our Counsellor Education Research Day recently that we held in Wellington, that a lot of the people who are teaching in counsellor education in bachelor's programs now have PhDs, which when I started, that was not the case. So that's becoming increasingly, I think it's great for counsellor education. I think it's great for inspiration to students coming through bachelor's programs to look at higher education and do more in-depth research. So Caroline, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add about that.
I did just want to say that back in the mid-90s, Unitec, which is a polytech up in Auckland, offered a Bachelor of Social Practice with a major in counselling. So it was before Bachelor of Counselling. And there was a small research project that was associated with the third year there. So I think that there has been sort of smatterings of research in the undergraduate space, but as Raewyn said, at the NZAC Education 2 days that we had recently, there were some wonderful presentations from undergraduate programs as well as postgraduate.
Kia ora, thank you all. I think it's important to acknowledge that the 14 programs that are available in counsellor education throughout the country now are accredited by our professional body, New Zealand Association of Counsellors. So there are 4 Master of Counselling programs and then the 10 Bachelor programs with various names, but basically Bachelor of Counselling. And there are 6 polytechs and 4 private training establishment programs. Would anyone like to, since you 3 are all on that Counsellor Education Accreditation Committee, speak briefly to that and how that's come about?
Well, I'll just say that we have a set of counsellor education standards now that Paul, you alluded to, with that provide the basis for our counsellor accreditation, and in those standards there is a very clear requirement for undergraduate programs to acknowledge basic and teach research methodology, and for master's programs to have a research component in their teaching. So that is that's a requirement for a program to become accredited by the New Zealand Association of Counsellors in this country. So Judi, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Just one thing that actually it was in 2016 that I think we set up the first standards, and that was as a result of a debate about whether the New Zealand Association of Counsellors would be self-regulated or whether it would go for government regulation. It was an interesting debate within the association, and the choice was to stay with self-regulation. So to do that, there were various things the New Zealand Association of Counsellors had to do. And so one of them was to set up an accreditation program standard for the programs. In 2016, we worked really hard. We looked at standards from other countries and sort of tried to develop it. And in 2013, I think, Raewyn, we upgraded. Was it 2023? 23.
Yeah. The standards came into effect in 2019. So as Judi said, we developed them around about 2016, 2015, 2016, but they actually came into effect for all programs in 2019, and there was a grandparenting period. But in 2023, we updated the standards, which is something that we are continuing to do. And when programs become accredited, they're accredited for a five-year term. So that was a little bit interrupted by COVID, as you can imagine, but generally it's a 5-year term.
So I think the research component got more emphasis in the latest, standards as opposed to the first one, but that's part of those standards. Yep.
And ever since the beginning of our professional association, I think in 1974, it was the New Zealand Counselling and Guidance Association. You'll see there that the first volume of the journal was published in 1976, and I've got a copy of it here. So there was an interest in research right from the beginning. Yeah. And looking at even an article on guidance in the intermediate school, which is around ages 11, 12, for young people of that age, even though the only government-funded counselling in schools were for secondary schools. Then they changed to the New Zealand Association of Counsellors, and the journal sort of changed its look and all the contents on the back. And then finally became the New Zealand Journal of Counselling, and the most recent issue that's printed from last year is there. So just to show you that's been there, and at times there's been a waning, I guess, in the input and interest, but there's a renewed interest, I think, in how we can now develop research within our local context. And it's been helped by now having the journal online and being accessible through DOI numbers and so on. So that's been a great shift.
Can I speak to that just for a second, Paul? Sorry.
Certainly, Judi.
It'll come up later when we think about the challenges that the research in counselling faces. And one of them, I think, I was looking at something, Nathan, that you'd written recently, that idea about promotion for academics. And we had a thing called the performance-based research funding. Not quite sure Australia's got something similar. I don't think it's quite called the same thing. But to be able to get funding for a university, they had to have, good research criteria and good research outputs from academic staff. And journals were given status points, if you like, and unfortunately the New Zealand Journal of Counselling was not high in that. So one of the challenges for a lot of counselling academics was where to be able to publish their stuff, to be able to get the credit for it. The New Zealand Journal of Counselling now has a much higher, it's not status, I just can't think of the word, whatever. So it actually is a better place to put it, and of course it's much more appropriate often for academics who are working in New Zealand to have it available to students and academics in New Zealand. So,
thanks, Judi. I might go on to briefly speak about counsellor education here at Waikato, and I think the program began in the 70s and through to the mid-90s was very much focused on an eclectic Western-dominated approach to counselling. But in the early 90s, Gerald Monk came on board and alongside brought in, or Wendy Drury was here, but he brought in John Winslade as well and others, where they created the program to be focused solely on narrative approaches based on the work of Michael White from Adelaide and David Epstein in Auckland. And so in 1997, they produced this book around narrative practice and teaching of narrative here at Waikato. And over time, because of the critique of Māori students and the lack of connection, I guess, often through traditional approaches, there has been a strong and developing and ongoing emphasis on how we understand models of well-being within the Māori world and how we might try and understand that within the work that we do. And we've found here at Waikato that using narrative approaches has been supportive in hearing the stories of local people and our students. And in 2017, I think, my colleagues, along with a number of graduates and students at the time, produced this book, Moi Moia, Māori Counselling Journeys. So it tells stories of how to integrate post-structuralist theory along with whakaaro Māori, Māori knowledges, and how that's then taken into practice in different ways. So the university now has had 30 years here of teaching narrative therapy. And in 2003, Kathy Crockett introduced a postgraduate certificate in counselling supervision. And in one of the papers, there was a joint research project with the students looking at an aspect of counselling supervision. And so each year when we've run that paper, which doesn't happen every year, but there've probably been 10 or 12 publications come from that program of small studies that the students and the teachers have been doing. Caroline, do you want to speak about where we are now since you joined us this year?
Where we are now, Paul, that's a big part, a big question, where we are now. So we have quite a new team, actually, teaching on the program. I joined in March and a woman from Auckland, Jeannie, joined just before I did, and we have another permanent full-time staff member and 2 teaching fellows. So there's 6 of us in the team all at the moment. And I guess research is encouraged, and we do have, Paul, you'll probably be able to speak more about this than I can, a directed study paper. And we do get lots of inquiries for PhDs from both international people. In fact, probably in my experience, in my very short experience here, more internationals than domestic, but I don't think that that's probably true overall.
So yes, there's a range of different research size project sizes that students can be involved in. Our Masters does offer an 8 taught paper program, where there is engagement in small research within the papers. And if I can give an example of that on our next slide, for the last 20 years, we've offered what we call a community day, a day where we share some of the practice and research involved in the program. And so this is the program for this year coming up. And two of the students here have worked on a practice paper that they developed in one of the papers they were studying. And ANZJFT recently had a call, I think, around Indigenous approaches or work. And so these two students have submitted, and these articles have been accepted for review. So that's a wonderful step for them to have. We have an international student from Japan, so he's going to be speaking about his experience of the shifting of meaning making and understanding meanings. And then Caroline, along with Jeannie and I, are presenting a little bit about our own work. But I think just to show at the bottom of that slide where we're heading to, next year we're bringing in a new paper around addictions counselling. And two of our team in their doctoral research included post-humanist theory and ideas from new materialism. So I'm sure that'll be coming to the fore in some of the teaching and research over the next few years. Raewyn.
Thanks, Paul. At Massey, we have a Master of Counselling that is Tiriti-led and pluralistic. So Massey University is a Tiriti-led university. So that means for us that our work throughout the university is under the auspices of the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which is a document that partnership document between Māori and Pākehā, and we see it as a governing body, I guess. And as a pluralistic program, we don't privilege any one way of working above any other. So the Masters was developed from a postgraduate diploma in the 1980s, although, perhaps Judi might remember it might be more in the 1970s, but around about that time. And as Judi said before, attracting school teachers to counselling was the primary motivation. Our team today, our Massey program today, and I haven't put this on the slide, but we are... Our master's program is a combination of a postgraduate diploma in counselling and guidance that kind of alludes to that time before where many teachers came into the program, and then there's a selection process into the Master of Counselling itself. And we are a hybrid, a blended program. We have students all over the country, and we have block courses in person. So our postgraduate program's pretty big. Our team, we have seven academics who are committed to building a research capability, and we've also brought on 3 senior tutors this year. So we've got a team of 10 at the moment. So it's a big team. Our academic staff supervise our students to complete a systematic review in their master's program. So they get to choose, students get to choose a counselling topic that they explore. And one of the reasons that we do a systematic review is because of the time available to get ethics approval, and this is one of the realities working in a big university, and so a bigger ethics approval we leave to the PhD students. We encourage our students to present research and to publish. So the same as Waikato University, we have a day in one of our block courses. This year we had 14 students presenting their research, and they covered a multiple number of topics, and many of those will go on to publish their research, not just in the New Zealand Association of Counsellors journal, but also in international journals. So we're very proud of that. We also have introduced a PhD by practice, which is quite exciting. And we sit in the Institute of Education, and that falls under the Institute of Education, but that gives PhD students an opportunity to bring to work on cases from their practice that they would integrate, do a critical interpretation of those cases and bring it into a PhD thesis. So we don't have too many students doing that yet, but we're looking to grow that. In 2026, we have a collaborative relationship with the University of Auckland, and we are planning an international hybrid conference on pluralistic counselling here. And this is quite exciting because we're doing this in quite a different format, because we're trying to showcase our Indigenous selves, I guess, and the partnership that we have in Māori in this country. We want to start the conference with a pōwhiri here on a marae, and that will be filmed and then streamed to the UK, where people in various parts of the UK will be working with their Indigenous peoples and watch our streaming, because we'll be the first being in New Zealand, but then they will also be doing something in their local areas that we'll be able to watch. And we'll also have some people on the ground. So that's all in the planning stage at this point, but that's quite an exciting opportunity to develop, to showcase research, I guess. And we're also have talked to Susan, who's online today, about a series of counselling texts for the Pacific region that's that we're that's gone to she's seeking. Talking to a publisher, and we're just waiting to hear about what's happening in that space. So we've got a number of things happening, and a number of things that we're excited about to do with research. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Susan, to that, but
do you mind if I jump in just briefly, Nathan?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, for sure.
And I'm so happy to see most of you, because I've met you in the conversation about the textbook series that I must say ended up being a relatively arduous process. But I just found out on Tuesday that Palgrave has accepted the proposal. So it's on. We're doing it.
Yes.
It's been approved. I've given them 10 titles. I think there's going to be flexibility with that. But I'll have some meetings in October and November with the commissioning editor for Palgrave, because what they're doing with us is quite unusual. And so they're setting this up so it's an edited series, but in this region, which they've never done before. Usually everything goes through their London office. So I'm just waiting to find out what our parameters are going to be and how we'll progress that. But it's official as of Tuesday, and Nathan knew that because I wrote him right away. I was super excited. So I was going to send emails out in the next couple weeks, but I'm glad I've been able to mention it, and I will be sending more information out as soon as I know and putting some structure around this. And so hopefully within about 6 months, we can make some decisions about possibly working with like an editorial committee between our two countries and kind of figure out ways of progressing this. It's going to work for everyone. So super excited and a little anxious.
That's an exciting thing, because research and scholarship, this is the scholarship side of it, and it'll make such an important contribution to having textbooks that are actually contextualized, that make sense within our own context. So very exciting stuff.
I just wondered if, Judi, you wanted to add anything else, or?
I'll just add a little bit, Paul. Thank you. As I said, I don't really feel like I can speak for the University of Canterbury, especially now, but I guess it's just that same background as Waikato and Massey, that in the 70s we all sort of picked up American models and theories because that's what the people who were running the programs knew, and we were all in education. At Canterbury, they all started looking for slightly different ones, and that's where Waikato became narrative, and Canterbury sort of pushed on solution focused at that point, had quite a connection with NZAC and Berg in the States, and Bob Monti, who I worked with at that time, he was really instrumental in sort of getting that off the ground. And that still stays, that idea of social constructionist theory and knowledge with the Master of Counselling program. In about 2015, an opportunity came to move from education to health. So actually, the counselling program is now under the Faculty of Health, which enables it to have quite a number of courses that are connected with things like palliative care, I'm just trying to think, addictions, and sort of moving quite a bit out of education, which often felt a strange place to be because they didn't quite understand us. So it was a Master of Counselling for a start, and it did have a research thesis in it. And so that was a time when all of the students did a 90-point, I think, research thesis, many of which were then able to be published or, moved forward for publication. And in about, I might be slightly wrong with my years here, but in about 2022, that changed. It's still a Master of Counselling, but the challenge was, I think, like a lot, that the students that were enrolling in these programs were really focused on practice and not so much on research. It took up a tremendous amount of their 240 points to do the thesis. It took up a tremendous amount of their time getting ethics approval for that research, and it took up quite a lot of time of the academic staff to supervise the research projects. And the health shift actually was helpful because there were more staff there that were interested in supervising the students. So all of those challenges, I think, meant that the group who are now running the program changed it so that the Part 2 thesis is now optional as a dissertation or paperwork. And I think I was talking to one of them last month, and they said very few of them are taking the research option, which I think is, a tragedy in a way. And somebody mentioned PhD inquiries, that the PhD inquiries that we've had have tended to be from overseas rather than sort of locally, even though to teach in the counselling program you need to have a PhD. So
yeah, and with those overseas inquiries, are they from other counselling professions overseas, or do they tend to come from different disciplines?
A number of disciplines really, but some of them are counselling.
Okay, yeah,
that's about it.
Yeah, so that's a bit longer than perhaps we initially negotiated, Nathan, but it's us.
No, great introduction. Thank you so much, and that's given us, I guess, lots of rich context from where each of you are coming from, as well as the history. One of the things I was just wondering about, just for our audience too, there's been lots of mention of counselling and no mention of psychotherapy. In Australia, we have the two as a sort of together in one of the associations specifically. And just wondering if you've got any comments around that, just for explanation.
I'm just looking on my phone, on my thing. I'd have to rummage through, but Bob Monti actually wrote an article for in a journal, which was actually about comparing the Australian psychotherapy counselling and counselling in New Zealand. I'm just not quite sure where that was. I could rummage around while we're talking.
Okay.
We did have a combined association, of counselling and psychotherapy, a bit like BACP, I guess. However, when statutory regulation seemed to be the big thing to go for, the psychotherapists, many of them went along that route, and Keith Tudor from Auckland has written about that quite a bit in terms of how regulation under legislation might have some benefits, but it also has some challenges. And he wrote an article, "The Law is an Act," you know, and on playing on that idea of the law as an S, and challenging his colleagues to think about whether this was the right pathway to go. There's been a huge debate within the counselling profession about whether we should have gone under that pathway, but some pushback from various ministers and government bodies. The current situation for counselling is that we are self-regulated in an agreement with the Ministry of Health, so that we are able to find, as in we counsellors who are qualified and approved, able to find employment or contract work within the health system. Otherwise, people are registered under the Health Practitioners Competency Assurance Act, and there are about 16 or 17 different disciplines regulated under that, but not counselling. Psychotherapy is one of those registered.
Yeah. And has that sort of made a divide between the two, given one's self-regulated or one's government regulated, or?
Judi.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's just it's more almost the division of funding for psychotherapists as opposed to counselling. I think I might have mentioned that in the university system, it's quite difficult to get funding. It probably is in most places now, but especially in counselling, I think it's really hard to get that. Psychotherapy seems to be able to access more funding than.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure how many programs there are, Judi. I know the one at AUT, but are there other?
That's the only one, I think.
Right.
Right.
So only one psychotherapy training program in New Zealand, compared with, what did I say, 14 counselling training programs.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think, Nathan, I guess to answer your question directly, there was a split between the psychotherapists and the counsellors some years ago, and probably, Judi, you know more of the history about it than I do. But I guess that split has not been. We like our psychotherapists colleagues, but that it hasn't. We haven't reunited as a and joined in the way that it is in Australia and in Britain. So, and I guess part of that is that the counselling's focus on more brief therapies. In the early 2000s is when that split occurred.
Right, sure. Yeah. Okay. Look, I just wonder whether I can open up to some of the other people joining us today, whether you've got any questions or comments I'd like to ask the panel. I just see a comment there. Thanks very much for sharing. This is really informative and useful. From your experience, would you think it is a good idea to incorporate a research component like a minor thesis or short paper into a counselling program accreditation system?
I guess that differs with each program because we do things in different ways. As I mentioned, in each of our taught papers, there's an element of research about practice, and that's shaped up in a particular way as students come to near the end, and where those two students who've submitted to ANZJFT this year, that was developed within one of those taught papers. We do have a 30-point directed study that is possible. Often that can be an autoethnographic kind of approach, reflecting on something in their lives and how they might learn around that in terms of developing practice in counselling is the offer of a 60-point dissertation, or then moving to 90 or 120-point theses. There are the occasional students who do the larger studies, but again, like Judi was saying, many are focusing on practice and might not come with a strong research area or interest. But that research is, if you like, woven within the program itself throughout. Yeah. So in answer to your question, I think being able to show some understanding of research and approach to research and inquiry, I think should be part of a program. Yeah.
And just to build on that, I think our systematic review is an opportunity to research, even though it's not original research, but it does set students up with the skills to go on and do, and the foundations to do a PhD and to understand what research really is, and its complexities, as well as the joys.
I'm guessing you've probably got a similar issue, and I think you've sort of alluded to it, is students don't sign up for counselling to learn and research, they sign up to learn practice. And yes. So it sounds like different institutions are approaching it differently to try and how do we package it in a way within the confines of the program that we're offering. How do we package it which where students will get that exposure, or at least the option to do some variations of research sort of projects?
And I think that that's what we found with the standards as we were setting them, because these standards are for both undergraduate programs and for postgraduate programs. It would have been impossible to have put, there has to be a research publication coming out from every student, or there has to be. So we had to play around with that a little bit in terms of making a slight variation in what an undergraduate program would be expected to do. Critical thinking, doing a research methods, understanding what research was, being able to read it, being able to, apply it to their practice. Whereas with the master's programs, we would expect an extra step on that. And I think most of the master's projects at the time, programs when that first was coming through, was that people would be able to go straight into a PhD from a Master of Counselling without having to do another master's that had a research basis to enable them to go into PhD. But it is there's not a lot that actually choose that path.
Yeah, sure.
I found the article, by the way, by Bob Monpie. It was in the New Zealand Journal of Counselling 2004, which you could find online. And it was counselling and counselling psychology in New Zealand, similarities and differences. And I notice in there that he mentions that one of the reasons I'd forgotten that we actually went for self-regulation was that there was a Health Practitioners Competency Assurance Act that was brought forward, and the psychotherapists and the psychologists went that way, and the counsellors chose not to.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the side.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks.
What's the surname of that author? Bob?
Oh, it's Robert, actually. So Robert Monpie, Peter Stanley, and Kerry Gibson. And it was the New Zealand Journal of Counselling 2004.
I've just put the link in the messages there, Judi.
Yeah, thank you.
I just couldn't quite pick up the surname of Robert that you said.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
May I ask, and I think maybe this, I'm not sure if this would be more direct to you, Raewyn, because you mentioned a PhD by practice, and I'm wondering a little bit about, I could see that having an appeal, maybe an idea around it being less intimidating for students that don't see themselves in, like a lot of our students want to practice. Can you tell us a few elements about that and a little bit of the backstory and what that's going?
Well, it sits within the Institute of Education where the counselling program sits. And I guess one of the commonalities between counselling and education is the practice component, and being, I guess, students being in schools when or our students being in practicums, and then later in often working as school counsellors or in other places on practice in practice. So I guess the PhD by practice was a different way of looking at the looking at a PhD, starting really from the actual practice that people are involved in, and then perhaps doing case studies or looking at other areas of practice that then they could provide some critique to, and then develop a thesis around that practice. So it's I guess a little bit a PhD in reverse, if you like, starting with the practice. So,
if I can add too, Susan, there's the offer here at Waikato of a Doctorate of Education in EdD, and that offers 4 taught papers to begin with, and then a 360-point thesis rather than a 480-point thesis, which the PhD is. And the 4 taught papers will look at some of those grounding steps for people who aren't research savvy in terms of setting up a design, looking at literature review, the proposal and ethics review. So a lot of that can be done before they actually start their research, data gathering and so on. So it's more of a structured way of doing a doctoral study for practitioners. It was set up for those in schools in particular, but it can be used by counsellors who might like to go that pathway. Yeah.
But part of their preparation is those 4 papers that they're doing with someone, and that is that pre an acceptance into a PhD program, and then yep. That's really clever.
And if they don't proceed, they can come out with a PG cert or a PG dip in research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really clever workaround. We have such difficulty here, and that's a very clever kind of thinking. That's a very, we haven't even talked about this, Nathan, something like this, have we? Like, it's super clever to start to play with, because we don't have anything like that in my knowledge in Australia. Not all of our masters even have research course components, and so we're really on the back foot of even getting students that might be interested in research, because we don't even have that built into a lot of our master's programs to get them prep ready.
I think we've got the methodology, but not all masters have project work. So some will have methodology but no projects, some will have methodology and project, or mini projects, and then or major projects. So we've got such a variation in terms of the volume of research and whether it's just research literacy or research production.
Yeah. It'd be fun to kind of play around with. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, in terms of your did I hear something was talking about those research days, and those with the students? So do you have research gatherings with people cross-institutional as well, or is it just in terms of students presenting their projects with each?
A little bit of both. We've I think our program, and obviously Waikato, and I know Auckland University, and I presume Canterbury too, have research days with their students. But we've just had the counsellor education, the NZAC Counsellor Education Committee have recently organised a research day for academics or counsellor educators. So we had a one-day meeting and to talk about the joys and challenges of counsellor education, which we all experience, both of, and then followed by a day of research where many of the people in this Teams room, some of the people presented, and many other people from other counsellor education programs presented. People who were beginning PhDs, people who had just completed PhDs, and people who were embarking on other research projects. So, and there's the Thanks, Paul.
That was very slick, Paul.
He's good on the sharing, isn't he?
Yeah.
Great. So that was our day. And
Wow. And is this something you do each year or every 2 years? Or
well, we have done it before, and COVID really got in the way of a lot of this sort of stuff, and we were having meetings by Zoom, which didn't really lend itself to these kinds of days. But I think what we noted this time was an era of excitement about people actually getting together in the same space in real time and being able to have research conversations and talk about new research, talk about. I think the wonder of the day, certainly for me, was the variety of research projects. I mean, we covered just about everything to do with counselling in lots of different ways, and it was very exciting. And then to be able to talk to the people doing that research and have conversations and sharing about information was really wonderful. So do we do it all the time? We haven't done it consistently, but I think the message was very clear. Let's keep doing this.
Yeah. I imagine that would have like a remoralizing, a reconnection, a whole range of benefits that would come from this.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And excitement about research.
Yeah. Another question I had is, you're talking about I think, Paul, you're talking about the journal and how the journal wasn't recognised by as part of your academics counting of their research. And I know we have the same situation here. We have to publish in ranked journals in most academics and universities who are research active. And we don't have any ranked journals in Australia for the counselling, in the counselling and psychotherapy space. So we'd have to either submit into outside of our discipline or submit internationally. And I'm curious about the steps that, and you may or may not know this, that your journal took to improve its rankings or its recognition locally.
Judi, you might want to add at some stage, because you've been part of the history, I think, but between 2020 and 2023, I was part of the editorial group. And I think we were trying to tackle the visibility of the journal amongst the membership, but also the interest to actually invite people to write about practice and areas of reading and what their interests were. And so I contacted a librarian here about how the journal could be accessible through an online version rather than the clunky way we had it previously. And we'd been trying to make articles available online through the association, but then something would change in their website and all the articles would go missing. They weren't accessible for our students who were supposed to be reading them next week, that sort of thing. So I don't know whether it was a move by Waikato to sort of offer to do something that then brought in some competitiveness. But as we hear often from economists, competition can bring something useful. So eventually AUT, the Auckland University of Technology University, now have that online system with the DOI and so on. So that's only came in last year, and they're still working to put the back issues, make them available. But I think that's been a huge, significant move, which will help us. Judi?
No, you said it all.
Okay.
You said it all, Bill.
So make it more visible, more reliable, access.
Connected, accessibility, yes. Yeah. And so it's, it's there through the search words, what do you call them, keywords and so on. And we have connected with some of those, Abesco and various other groups over the years to have the journal a bit visible that way. But as I said, it was clunky. So now we've got a better streamlined process.
Right, excellent. What would you say would be the biggest challenges to developing research culture in the New Zealand context, when you sort of look at what the challenges that you face would be?
Caroline?
Money. Money.
Money.
Sorry.
Yes, money, absolutely, and availability of
Right.
staff, and also I think engendering interest in research. I think many students think that it's not for them, or that they can't write sufficiently well to embark on a research project, so it might feel a little bit inaccessible.
Right.
So I think breaking down those barriers is important.
I also wonder, just building on that, Caroline, about that you alluded to, is about the tolerance for discomfort in students, because research is hard. You know, it's not. I mean, it's as we all know, sitting here, who've been through it. You know, it's exciting, and there are many positive aspects to it, but it's not easy, and I think there is something about students not being able to or not being as open to feeling discomfort as they have been in the past. And the other thing I would add is the AI challenge that we're all facing too. That's growing, I think. Not to mention the world political framework, which is sending all sorts of weird messages to people about stuff that's not based on evidence. And so there's that, you know, evidence. There seems to be a disconnect between the rhetoric out there and it's not necessarily evidence based, and seems to be moving away from that understanding that that's actually quite critical.
Yeah. And that's it's an interesting point with the AI, because and the student discomfort and the amount of work and effort it takes to, and now AI takes a lot of effort away from people having to put that effort in. I wonder if that's potentially going to be an opportunity, or whether it's just going to be the threat. Like how the discourse around the AI challenge in the research or / counselling space emerging in the New Zealand context?
I think we're talking about it as both an opportunity and a challenge. I don't quite know where it's going to land, because I know that I was having discussions with Auckland University about a year ago about the possibility of using bots for basic skills training before students got to that more advanced level. That that might be an opportunity to ensure that that students had some grounding before they came in to work with us specifically.
Yeah.
But that got very quickly, that conversation sort of, between that conversation, then I think about 2 or 3 months, the whole bot idea got out of control somehow. And so I think things are changing so rapidly that it's very hard to see what the future will hold for us, and how we might use it. Might use it critically and authentically in a way that could be helpful. And I think we're all trying to figure that out.
Sure. Yeah, it's a moving feast, isn't it? Given that everything is changing so fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Judi, I'm just wondering, you sound like you've been in the space in the research space and the counselling world for quite a while. What sort of, if you're aware of this, what sort of steps do you think the New Zealand sort of counselling profession over time has taken to try and, how do we support research? How do we approach it as a profession? Because there's obviously the philosophy is research, and counselling often doesn't necessarily align with the scientist sort of model of that. So there could be those challenges. In what sort of ways have you sort of seen the counselling profession try and support research? And I think you mentioned one, which is around having the accreditation standards and in terms of the education. Are there any other sort of strategies you've noticed to take to try and support building some sort of culture of research and acceptance of it?
That's an interesting question. It's a bit tricky, really. I think the idea that a lot of my research was about the professionalisation of counselling in New Zealand, and that was to try and raise the identity of counselling, because at the time it didn't have an identity. And then sort of encourage, as part of that, encouraging counsellors to do research of their practice. And so there was quite a move we did at Canterbury of trying to encourage actually practitioners, once they'd got out, to remember that they'd already done research and that they could be researching their own practice, and that they might actually be able to use it, especially if they were in a school environment, to gain more resourcing from the school environment. So I think there still is quite a benefit of learning about research and learning to read research and to understand it. And I sort of look at social media and things like that and think, oh yes, but of course now you get a whole lot of stuff and you don't know where it's come from. So I think encouraging students to be more aware of checking out the validity of some of the stuff they're reading would be really important. I think still the main thing that's happened in New Zealand has been that the main researchers are the academics that are running the programs, and I think that'll always be the case, really. And encouraging students. I'm sort of laughing when Paul's saying, you know, the journal didn't have, it suddenly went offline and all the students couldn't find stuff. And I always know when there's a literature review going on as an exercise in the counselling program, because suddenly I get all these notices from academia saying that, you know, somebody's tried to access my articles. And I think there has been quite a lot of counselling research in New Zealand, and a lot of it's been published in the local journal, but a lot of it's managed to get into international. The British Journal of Guidance and Counselling has been quite a good outlet for counselling research here.
Counselling and psychotherapy research,
yep.
CPR.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's there, but I can't see that future, really. Oh, and I think you mentioned it before. It's actually the quantitative research can be done in a much shorter period of time than the qualitative. So a lot of the hurdles that I think a lot of our counselling programs have faced has been that there's been a strong emphasis, and so it should be, on qualitative research, but that's meant that it takes longer, and it doesn't necessarily look like it's bringing in extra funding.
Yeah, so even our methodology at the time means we're less likely to attract funding for it, and so there's a hurdle that's within that. And do you find in New Zealand that many of the most of the academics are teaching only academics, or is there generally a good mix of teaching / research academics in the counselling world?
Well, if I could speak from Canterbury, that was actually one of our biggest challenges, because we were looking enviously at the other programs that seemed to have many more academics. And so we were overloaded with the teaching load. There was a program that said how much percentage of your time could be in research, but I think that always ended up as a minus in my case.
We can relate here in Australia to that.
I think it remains a challenge everywhere, really, and especially with reduced funding and reduced resources. It's I think the other thing, just to add to that, is that I think earlier this year our government here in New Zealand took away a major source of funding for research in the human in social sciences research and humanities. So, you know, that was a big blow to our research program, to counselling research.
Yeah. Okay. Just having a look at some of my questions here. So in terms of the future, what
what do you sort of think the future holds for, you know, the way forward for New Zealand in terms of the trajectory of research, or what you think might need to happen to strengthen it, if that was an area of focus that was of interest?
I think the injection of new staff into our program, and you might find this too, Raewyn, where there's a different energy and an opportunity to reflect. My concern is the sustainability, the energy, and the support that they should receive through the institution. But institutions change priorities. You know, we were asked to encourage to grow our program 3 to 4 years ago, and I said yes, we could do that if we had the staffing. And the argument was made, well, if you have the numbers, you'll get the staffing. That sort of came back to bite us in the rear end, really, when there are effects on the teaching team. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Nathan, but this idea of, I think I'm hopeful and looking forward to what this team here will produce in the next few years, and the quality of our graduates too. You know, many of them go on to teach in programs around the country. So while they might not be back here doing it, we know that they have an effect for the profession and the space of counsellor education within the country.
Yeah, so really just investing in supporting the students to come through and graduate and just hopefully get into PhDs, then that becomes that sort of cycle to grow it.
Yeah.
I think I would go slightly further than what Paul has said, and I agree with what he has said, and that is that structurally, you know, there's this move away from humanities and social science and a prizing of science and empirical knowledge. And I think that the structure, like we alluded to the government and the withdrawal of funding, that has a massive part to play in the valuing of research from this area. And even, you know, I sometimes have questions around whether the field of counselling is valued sufficiently, just because of where the funding gets allocated and how we're quite often across the board seen as the sort of the bottom of the list when it comes to prioritising things like room spaces and understandings around ratios of teachers to toera. You know, we're teaching skills, and it's a bit different from an engineering degree. It's feeling like a hobby horse of mine, but and that kind of ties into research and the expectations of us. Not only are we teaching, but we're expected to be part of the wider university and be joining into those wider hui, and then there's the marking and the preparation, and someone like me gets a day of research a week, which that doesn't happen in a usual kind of week. So it's there's a tension there, I think.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges, isn't it? Because I think in counselling lectures often we've got our teaching, we've got maybe clinical supervision of students, we've got to run our own, many of us will have our own practice as well, that we try and maintain our currency. There's all these factors. And then, as you mentioned, the poor cousin sort of being treated as a poor cousin, because we physically don't have the space to be able to do a lot of the other stuff the other staff can be doing as well, outside of the disciplines. So that's, I'm glad to hear that you're struggling with the same things. Well, not glad, you know, it's reassuring to know that we're not the only ones who have that same type of struggle with just within the systems.
I think, look, I agree with everything that Caroline said, and you, Nathan, too. You know, we are all struggling with those things, but I guess where I'm hopeful is the part that research can play, because I think with our education standards, which I feel quite passionate about, because what our education standards say is that every counsellor in this country now has to have a degree or a master's. In the past, that wasn't the case, and with that means that our students are more, they're higher qualified, they're thinking academically, understanding those processes. There are more PhDs in counselling now than there ever has been, and I think we're also seeing, I think in our research day, a lot of younger people coming through that are really excited about counselling having a place in the world. And so that really gave me heart, I think. So, you know, I'd love to see the younger staff and at programs and people who are doing their PhDs and encouraging those people to publish when they finish their PhDs, and to really make counselling visible in ways that it perhaps hasn't been before. And maybe we will get some counsellors tend to be nice people, and they're not very politically active. So I guess, you know, hopefully growing some strong voices in that space to really push back with the government would be great too. So I guess that's what my wish and hope, rather than seeing it quite yet, but I can, you know, I've had glimpses.
So you're sort of saying is it's the slow march. The levels coming up, people are coming through, the qualifications are increasing. So the future, the momentum is a positive direction, and it's a slow one rather than we're not going to have any amazing solutions overnight.
Exactly.
Things are improving.
Exactly. Meanwhile, we're doing the hard mahi back here in the in the marking and the teaching world, and trying to fit in research where we can.
Yeah, and it also sounds like, from what I'm hearing, is that you've got some efficiencies there to try and support the research. So, such as the systematic literature reviews, just saving the ethics process and making the journey a little bit easier for students. Having the choices, so students who are academically minded can go on and choose the bigger projects versus those which say, look, you know, that's not for me, the research journey. So I just want to be a practitioner. So it sounds like there's some different sort of mechanisms you've got in there to try and help support that as well as, you know, trying to, you know, the doctorate, which is around the practice. So again, it's making it easier, the transition from the practitioner mindset into the researcher mindset as well.
And I think too that all the way through these programs, all of our programs, I know that there's a big encouragement to integrate theory into practice, and that's so that theory is not, and research is not seen as something out there, but as something that is integrated into what we do. And when we do that, we're better practitioners. And I think that's where we can get students, I guess, to build some excitement about research and understand that academia is not so scary. It's actually part of what we do, and it makes us do it better.
Yeah.
Just wanted to add one more thing, which is sort of an aside really to what we're saying, but it came when Raewyn said, you know, we're not very political animals or something, but actually we're all members of the New Zealand Association of Counsellors, and the standards sit under the New Zealand Association of Counsellors. So we're encouraging students to become members of that association, and that association has become much more political over probably the last 10 years, I think. So we've, you know, when particular government policies come forward, we have a voice in there. So I think even though that's not necessarily about research, it can influence the research, and it can certainly influence the interest that students have in becoming, or people have in becoming counsellors.
Yeah.
An example of that, if I might add, Judi, was when there was a select committee hearing around conversion therapy.
Right.
And the professional body took a stance and presented at the select committee of Parliament, asking for it to be banned. And I know there were a few members who weren't too happy with that, but it's part of our core values, I think, too, in terms of the understanding of who we're serving and issues around social justice and fairness.
Yeah. And I think I think when we do produce research, or if we are having to advocate for various positions as associations, having some research backing to be able to back our claims as well sort of makes it more credible, I think, in the eyes of the governments who are assessing our claims as well.
Yeah.
Just wondering if there's anyone else from the any other audience who'd like to ask any questions. We've probably got about 7 minutes to go, so now's your opportunity to ask any other questions you might have. Comments? Or perhaps you might, anything which stands out to you for our Australian audience that you think, this is something I think we need to consider from the Australian context. Any fresh ideas that you sort of heard today?
Hello everyone, I'm Sonam from Western Australia.
Sonam?
Yeah, it's 9:20 a.m. here. No question, but I really wanted to share that there is such a striking resonance and similarity between what's unfolding in terms of counselling research here in Australia as well as in New Zealand. So it just feels like there is a common thread and some driving force behind that really needs to change overall. So I just wanted to share that it's a relief to know that we are not the only ones, if that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've certainly heard there's a lot of shared struggles and a lot of shared, I guess, evolution as well. Sounds like the New Zealand sort of experience, how you've evolved and how, you've had to fight for the professionalism and develop that and the status and recognition. And that's been a part of the journey, but also the journal, having your journal. And there's been a whole lot of things, as well as self-regulation versus the regulation questions. We're looking at those very questions at the moment, and seeing the difference when regulation comes in with the psychology discipline and all the benefits they got with it. But then they also had the negative, straitjackets from that as well. So it's interesting just to see how. I just wonder how much of the challenges and strategy and issues we've had is whether it's just a natural growth of our profession, and particularly the counselling, because they appear to be shared, certainly in the UK as well. America is certainly a lot more further advanced than anywhere else in terms of the counselling history. But yeah, it's quite interesting to just notice a lot of the similarities, but also some of the freshness and new ideas that you've shared today too, that we certainly probably haven't considered around. So look, I might just bring our meeting to a close now, and just want to thank you all. I really appreciate Paul organising and Carolyn organising more people to come in from around New Zealand, and so to expand the discussion. And it's good to hear different institutions, what different institutions are doing, and showing that there is a diversity. It's not just like a mono focus on research, but you have different ways of introducing it to students and conceptualizing it and that. So appreciate that. There's certainly I think there's some interest around the doctorate, the way of presenting the doctorate. I know Sonam, actually, you've got also a very similar, I think yours is a professional doctorate, which is quite unique in Australia. Which I could sort of hear some similarities between the doctorate Raewyn's flagged, and just sort of looking at some of my notes, and also what I'm certainly interested in is that whole researcher day. So I know the national heads, we come together once a year, but we've only just got a new counselling and psychotherapy educators group to support the educators more so than the heads. And I'm sort of thinking around ideas around, maybe it's a good idea for us at some point to have an annual meeting as well as have a separate day for research as part of that. So yeah, Paul.
So Nathan, just to clarify, we had a Counsellor Educators Day and then a second day for the research.
Yeah.
So it was a 2-day event.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that's a really good idea to have that education focus and then a research focus. So look, this is certainly high value from my perspective, and I really appreciate your time. Let us know if you want anything, like want want to connect in with the Australians at some point for other things, happy to network with you guys as well. And yeah, it's great to hear what you've had to present today.
Maybe we can all come over to Australia and we can have an Australasian research day.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Raewyn, I was thinking the same thing about like a Australasian conference maybe that we could get together. But I was kind of hoping to go to New Zealand, so we might have to arm wrestle on location.
Yes, we're both fighting to get to the other side.
Well, you can come to our pluralistic conference.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so
November
much.
26th.
Thank you, Nathan, for hosting and organizing. And it was so great to see everyone, and really, I feel a bit buzzy with excitement. So thank you.
Yeah,
I
thank
agree.
you,
Thank
Nathan,
you very
for
much.
organising this, and Judi and Raewyn for joining us. Caroline, you're organising. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And so I'll look at putting this on YouTube and send you all links so that you can access or share it with other people. But yeah, really valuable conversation. Thank you all for your time today.
Okay, well.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.